Napoleon is directed by Ridley Scott and stars Joaquin Phoenix, Vanessa Kirby, and among others. And this story, it deals with Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power, along with his relationship that deals with Empress Josephine. And in this story, it deals mostly into the events that takes place where he's already going from working as a leader and stuff to eventually becoming a power, to reaching his height of power and things like that, and a lot of the conflicts that involve with not only the battlefield but also his marriage to his wife Josephine. Now here's a little backstory. Now this movie was directed by Ridley Scott, who, what can I say, he's definitely one of my all-time favorite directors. He's made so many great movies that I can't get enough of, you know, ranging from Gladiator to a lot of his other classic works, including Alien, of course. You also have American Gangster that I really enjoyed. And if we're talking about pure Ridley Scott epics that deal with a lot of, you know, old battle scenes and stuff like that, Gladiator is definitely my go-to. And then also a couple years ago, he brought out The Last Duel, which I really enjoyed. And the guy is just such a really known talent because it seems like even at his age now, being in his 80s, he still knows how to really make these kind of like, you know, old school type of epic epic historical epics that I really get a kick out of. And a couple years ago when he did The Last Duel, it really showed that the guy just really knows his stuff when it comes to really making those old school type of, you know, movies that we don't really see too often anymore. And when they do get released, they unfortunately don't do too well at the box office because a lot of people, it seems like a lot of, you know, movies that he makes nowadays, they appeal more to like older folks and stuff. But it just really always gets me curious on what he does next with a lot of his projects. And he's such a versatile director, you know, from doing countless great movies like Thelma and Louise, Alien, Legend, which I haven't seen since I was a kid, but I remember enjoying that. And then, you know, to other stuff like dramas he's done, like American Gangster. You know, the list goes on. Like, the guy just knows how to make so many great films. And there are some hit and miss ones that he's done that I haven't always been the biggest fan of. Like, don't even start on Robin Hood. I think out of his historical epics, that was the one where he definitely really missed the mark a lot. And that was definitely one of the most boring films that he did. While it's not necessarily based on reality, the whole, like, the epic fantasy type of movie that he was going with really could have been a whole lot better. And I haven't seen Kingdom of Heaven, but I do need to check that one out one day. Because I hear that's another great one that he did. Though I do hear that the director's cut is definitely the preferred version. But going into this one, I was curious, but at the same time, I just kind of went into it just open-minded because I don't really know what to expect much, especially with it being a biographical film that's about Napoleon and everything. And so I kind of thought going from the trailers and stuff, we would basically be seeing his rise to power and things, and him basically doing all his conquering stuff. But I gotta admit, after upon seeing the film, I was a little slightly disappointed with the movie. And I think this more has to do with the when it was announced that we were not getting the full version that Scott intended to do that he was going to release. Because from what we've heard was that there was actually a 4-hour version that he shot that is supposed to be released later on Apple TV. But for the theatrical release version that he's made that got into theaters, we got the 2.5-hour version. And this definitely showcases where it could be either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how that other version turns out. But going just based off the theatrical version, I will say that while the film is decent, it's a decent watch, it did have some things that I think really could have been benefited a whole lot better and could have really showcased a lot more than what we got in store for us. But to get my pros out of the way, I do really enjoy the cast in this. Joaquin Phoenix, he really owns the role as Napoleon. His way of really being brooding and, you know, being that very powerful and stuff, it really showcased how much of a capable actor that he is. You know, and Joaquin Phoenix has always been one of my other favorites. And it's great to see him working with Ridley Scott again after all these years since he did Gladiators. And I really enjoyed a lot of his chemistry with Vanessa Kirby in this as well. I thought they worked really well together. And he does also have some funny parts that surprisingly actually made me laugh, surprisingly. And that's something you'll get from time to time with Ridley Scott in some of his movies. He'll put some dark humor in there that actually does work. In fact, I remember a couple years ago when he did Last Duel, he had that too as well. But the other big standout is definitely Vanessa Kirby. I've always liked her as an actress, and a few years ago when she did Pieces of a Woman, that really showcased her as an actress as well. And I'm glad that she's come a long way with, you know, getting these really meaty roles. And while I do have a lot of stuff in her to criticize for as far as the writing aspect of her character, I still think that her performance was still very strong, and you can definitely tell that she's the kind that tries to, you know, be there for Napoleon at times, but also is pretty much in that situation where he calls the shots and stuff. And a lot of the ways that she tries to invoke with him, trying to be on on his level and everything like that. It's very complex, but at the same time, it definitely is something that I think really needs a lot. It needs a better script. It could have been used with a lot better in the writing department. But then the rest of my pros, I really got to say too, the battle scenes are really epic in this. Like Scott, even at his age, he really knows how to craft a lot of great, brutal, and very outstanding battle sequences that are the closest that we probably ever will get to see. And I'm not trying to compare, but this is probably what I would imagine that Stanley Kubrick was trying to accomplish if he ever got his Napoleon biopic back in the 60s that he originally envisioned. Because I think if Kubrick ever did make his Napoleon film, he would have done it on such an epic scale that would have been on that really high budget. And you could definitely tell Ridley Scott really put a lot of all the budget. You can see the money on screen with a lot of the epic battles that take place and stuff. Especially where we're seeing parts that, well, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but let's just say there's a part that happens with a horse. And it is really shocking how there's some stuff that happens in this film that I didn't really expect. And they don't hold no bars. They don't really hold anything back when it comes to the brutality. But I also have a con in certain areas with that because we don't get enough of it, so to speak. And that's a really big thing to describe this movie, is that there's not a whole lot of stuff to really see because the pacing can be very slow at times, but also glossed over and going too fast at certain points where you're not really spending too much time on things. But to give my other pros, really newly enjoy the production design in this. You can tell that the set locations and stuff, the period pieces, the clothes, everything you can really think of when it comes to like the late 1700s is all there, and it really shines with a lot of the epic scope, and the really bleak cinematography is great too, especially in a lot of the battle sequences. And it did also give me flashbacks to The Last Duel as well, on that kind of level where it's very darkly lit at times, and it gives you that very macabre feeling. And then my other pros too, the score was great, and you also have like some interesting stuff that they really get into when it comes to the stuff involving where you see some of Napoleon's power coming into play in certain parts. But this is now where I have to get into my cons. And as much as I was really into the other stuff, what really holds the movie back for me the most is actually really the pacing. First of all, this movie is 2.5 hours, but it really feels like the first half really dragged at points where, even though it was doing some build-up, there's a lot of scenes that seem like, when we get into stuff that involves with the years that are going by, they don't spend a whole lot of time of events that take place in Napoleon's life. And I think that if you're going to really do a biopic like this, and you want to try to really showcase more of what he can do as far as being a strategist and stuff like that, you really want to spend more time with that in the battle scene department. Because even though those battle scenes are really great to see, and especially on the big screen, unfortunately a lot of scenes, they do go by really fast. And with the exception of the final battle, a lot of the scenes you could really count like maybe 2 or 3 minutes at a time. And that's really sad, because it really seemed like there was a lot of material that probably Scott shot that we may probably see in the longer cut that he got. But going just based on what we saw, unfortunately it is mishandled too, because I was more interested in seeing where that was going and stuff, because then it gets back into the stuff that's involved with the marriage problems that him and his wife are having, where he's trying to have a son and things like that. And I can see where it was trying to go for and stuff. And look, I'm not trying to compare this to the historical accuracy on how close this is to real life, because I don't know really much about Napoleon himself. All I know, just based on what I was, stories growing up and stuff, was that he was a known conqueror who conquered a lot of countries and other areas, and he fought in a lot of battles. That's really the basics I know of Napoleon, and there's always been those legends about him kind of being, very short and stuff, but from what I've also read too, he was more of an average height. And I think that is kind of also, you can tell that they're not going with the most historical accuracy when it comes to that, because Joaquin Phoenix is kind of a tall guy, not really too tall, but you want to get, if you're going to go for more like accurate casting and stuff, you probably would get someone that's maybe a little shorter than him. But with that being said, just going based on the movie itself part, I still thought it worked. But one of my other biggest cons I do have with the film, though, is that there's a lot of scenes that just go dragged out, and it seems like we get rinse and repeat of him fighting with his wife, going to battle, coming back, and there's sequences that involve where it really seems like we could have had more of a payoff that really played out later on in the film, because not going to go into spoilers, but when it gets to its close to its ending, I felt like I wasn't really feeling anything like I should have, because the dynamic that was there with them, just I wasn't really feeling as the movie went along further. And it really seems like I said earlier, the longer cut probably at least helps evolve with all those scenes that really fleshed out a lot more stuff. There's more I can go into detail, but that's really the biggest thing that I really had a problem with the most. And also, now this is also a thing too that I can really see a lot of criticism for, but I could see why on a directional standpoint they didn't want to go with that route, was not having the actors use actual French accents and stuff like that, or at least different accents that fit the actual, real life accuracy, like, because from what I also heard was that Napoleon was actually from Italy, but he lived in France. But like I said, the whole historical accuracy thing, I can really see all the criticism for that, but I'm just going solely based off the movie itself. And as a movie itself, it's a decent watch, but and I do like it better than Robin Hood, but I still really think that it could have been a whole lot better with a lot of stuff that could have been really a lot more fleshed out and really took its time in a lot of the editing, because there's also some stuff that they get into detail with that either gets a mention or we literally go to the next scene and not really have any time for it. And it also has a weird edit at times where you can tell that something was cut, where they're having where all of a sudden they're having an agreement on something that takes place, and then all of a sudden the next scene that's like that we backtrack that. And so like you can definitely tell that some of the editing really showcases that there was stuff cut in the movie that really could have went on longer. And so with that being said, there's more I could go into detail, but pretty much that's really the whole general gist of it. And with that, I'm going to give the movie just an average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. And so for those of you who have also seen Napoleon, let me know in the comments of what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.